All right, Holley, I am so thrilled to have you on the show today to talk to us about all God has you up to in your writing. And so would you start by telling listeners about yourself?
Yes, that's always a tricky question, right? So all the fancy stuff is I'm an author and speaker and life coach. The not fancy stuff is I love coffee, and I've been married to my husband, Mark, for about 20 years. We have a crazy family story. We couldn't have kiddos of our own. So our daughter came into our lives when she was 20. And so she's now 27. And so I'm also a Nana. And that has been totally unexpected and wonderful.
That is so cool. I don't think I knew about your daughter's story, and that's really cool. And how cool that you're in that new season. That's awesome. How old is your grandbaby?
It's 3, and then we have a grandson coming in July. So we'll have
fun. That is awesome. Well, what a fun thing to have to look forward to in the middle of coronavirus craziness. That's exciting. That's awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, and that's so sweet to hear. You've been married for 20 years. That's awesome. My husband and I got married last May, and so we're approaching our first year. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We're still figuring it out. But
yeah, it just gets better.
That's what people keep saying. Multiple people have told me that this week. So, no, that's so good. So, we talked a little bit before we hit record, listeners, just about how Holley has really spoken into my life over just the course of a very long time. I read 2 of her books, You're Made for a God-Sized Dream and You're Already Amazing, back when I was in college, and God just really used both of those messages in that season of my life. And those books were written a long time ago, but as I told Holley, I love kind of the message behind them. And so I'd love for you to share, Holley, about how God just put it on your heart to speak into women about the topic of chasing after your calling and, in that, standing in the truth of who God says that you are.
Yeah, well, I'm the granddaughter of Christian bookstore owners. So my grandparents had a little bookstore in South Texas. So I grew up being that little girl with a big stack of books, sitting in the corner and dreaming of writing one day. So
that's cool.
Writing was always my dream. And I worked for almost a decade for Dayspring Cards, writing greeting cards, which was fun. But around 2010, I felt like God asked me to take the step of going into my God-sized dream of writing. And so that book in particular came out of season when I personally made a leap of faith. And that was a great adventure. And so I wanted to be able to equip other women too, because I'd gone through all the fear and all the questions and all the am I crazies, and had a lot of moments when I wish I'd had someone sitting next to me with a cup of coffee to say, it's going to be okay. You have what it takes because God has called you to this. Keep taking one more small step. And so I hope that's what my God-Sized Dreams books are for other people who are taking their own leaps of faith.
I love that message. Like I said, I was in college kind of navigating what's that next step for me kind of after graduation. And as you know, that season of life is just crazy. And so that book just really spoke to me during that time. And I love that that's the season that you wrote it in as well. I think a common thread when you're a podcast host, you get to talk to a lot of really cool people, a lot of authors, and a common theme that I always see is as I hear authors talk about their book, it is a very well-worn life lesson for them, typically that they've unpacked in a book, right? Yeah. And so I think
we write what we need to hear and reread. My friends now, if I'm like, oh, I'm struggling with such and such, they'll be like, you need to reread chapter 8 of, this or that book.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful too what you put in print.
Yes. And last year you released a devotional book called Strong, Brave, Loved. Actually, this is one I don't have yet, so I'm excited to get it. So would you tell listeners about the book?
Yeah, well, it actually started with the book before that, Fierce Hearted. And so I wrote that out of a season in my life where I had gone through all this God-sized dreaming. And so many doors had opened and so many yeses had been given. And I exhausted myself completely doing everything all the time for everyone. And so I came to this point where I just thought, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And someone in my life had hurt me, and I was going to see my publisher, and I was sitting in the dark on this plane, crying into my 2 small napkins. Those are not good crying napkins. telling Jesus, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, I'm tired and I'm hurt and maybe I'm done. And I felt like he said, you know what, Holley, if that's the choice you make, I will love you anyway. But if you want to learn a different way of living, I will show you. And so that became, I pulled out my pen and I wrote, actually it was my Kindle. That's all I had. So I pulled up the notes feature on my Kindle and wrote this little fierce-hearted manifesto that became this book that really was me writing in process about how God taught me to embrace grace and slow down and allow myself to be who he created me to be. And once I released that book, I heard from a lot of women that they wanted a companion Devo to go with it, because I think those messages are ones we need to continue to hear. So that's where Strong, Brave Love came from. And in particular, I had gone to hear Priscilla Shire speak, and I had my mama on one side of me and my daughter on the other. And she said, wouldn't it be a shame if the enemy believed more about our potential than we do? And I thought, wow. And I thought about how the enemy accuses us, how we all struggle with lies, our own hearts here for whatever reason, someone has spoken them to us. We're just hard on ourselves, whatever it is. And I thought, not okay for women to not know that we are strong and brave and loved, including myself. And so that book really breaks it down day by day, just reminding our hearts of the truths we so easily forget and that we need it, and we need over and over.
Absolutely. And that's so important. I don't think we could study that or continue to point ourselves back to those truths enough, especially just in the world that we live in. And so what do you think, if you were sitting down with maybe, your former younger self, what truth about who we are in Christ do you think God has used the most in your own life personally?
I think one of the biggest is you have nothing to prove, because I'm a perfectionist by nature. My natural response to anything difficult is try harder. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to think that if I can keep it all together, that I will be loved and things will work out and all of that I have a lot to prove. And I think God frees us by saying, you know what, already approved you and I love you as you are. Grace is enough. It's there for a reason. You're going to need it every day, so use it. And so that's what I keep coming back to, even today. With all this stuff going on, I think all of us are just a little anxious and uneasy. And I was taking a walk and I was just praying, God, give me the courage to believe that you love me as I am right now. Because I think a lot of us are not as able to be productive as we would like to be right now.
Absolutely.
We're not able to do all the things that may give us some of our worth even. We're not able to be in the roles, maybe that we want to be in relationship to other people. And that's a very vulnerable place. And so I think for all of us today who are out of our routines, God just saying, you know what? You have nothing to prove. You don't have to do anything today except let me love you.
If you've ever taken your earrings off at the end of the day with that big sigh of relief, you need to hear about Comfy earrings. Comfy earrings are flat back, hypoallergenic earrings designed for 24/7 wear. No poking, no irritation, just beautiful, lightweight earrings that stay comfortable whether you're sleeping, traveling, working out, or running from one project to the next. They're perfect for women with sensitive ears, and they come in so many gorgeous everyday styles. Check them out at comfyearrings.com or through the link in the description. Refresh your jewelry box with earrings you'll never want to take off. Trust me, your ears will thank you. Now back to the show. Looking for non-toxic, high-quality soap made by a company you can trust? Let me introduce you to Indigo Sundries, a Christian, family-owned small business that's been handcrafting soap for over 20 years. Every bar is made the old-fashioned way and free from seed oils, parabens, phthalates, sulfates, and all the other things your skin just doesn't need. Just clean, skin-loving ingredients that actually leave you feeling moisturized and refreshed. Whether you love a good fragrance, prefer essential oils, or need a simple unscented bar, Indigo Sundries has something for everyone, plus liquid soaps, room sprays, and beard products too. Get free shipping on orders over $50, and don't forget to use code Rebecca10 for 10% off at checkout. Treat your skin to the good stuff at indigosundries.com.
I remember hearing a message one time. I think the message title was something around kind of that theme of having an audience of one. And the sticky statement, or whatever you want to call it, that I remember was, you have nothing to prove and one to please. And that always really just stuck with me. So that truth means a lot to me too. I think we just, in our heart of how God has called us to speak to women, I think we're cut from the same cloth. And so in that, I think that I also struggle with a lot of similar battles of our mind. So that means a lot to me too. So in March of this year, am I correct in saying that in the last week or so, you released another devotional book? Did I get the name right?
It's actually a little gift book. So it's just a compilation of a lot of different writing. I did that through Dayspring because I still partner with them. But yeah, it's called Cheering You On, 50 Reasons Anything is Possible with God. And that one I wrote mostly for my daughter, Lavelle, because
that's so fun.
The short story is she was in and out of foster homes most of her growing up years. Went through a lot of hard things. She is incredibly resilient and doing amazing now. But I know she didn't get to hear a lot of the things that I wish she had growing up. Like, you are loved, you're accepted as you are, you can do this, all the things. And so those are truths I think God wants to say to his daughters too. And so that little book is just 50 short reminders of all the ways that God is cheering us on, and also hopefully something that someone can hand to someone else in their life to say, look, I am for you no matter what. Because that was the process for Lavelle to come to really know that. I think she knows it now, that we are for her no matter what. But I'm glad that I have that as proof. That little book is a little bit more proof.
Absolutely. I love it. And I love how over the years you've kind of taken these universal messages and crafted them into these, whether it's a devotional book or a gift book. These are just great tools to just keep. I know for myself, I have kind of my short list of these types of books that I'll use as gifts. So when I actually looked up this one, I was just browsing Amazon on just the things you've done in the last few years. And I thought, I've got to add this one to just my Christmas gift list, and just, one of those books that if I'm needing a gift idea, that's maybe one of the ones I go to. So that one is getting added to the list. So I'm excited about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So why do you believe that so many women get trapped in that thinking kind of that we're talking about here, and believe the lie that they're not good enough? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it really goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, when the enemy came after Eve's heart with one little phrase, did God really say? And I don't think he's super creative. I think he still does the same with us. He just ends that sentence with whatever hits us in our most vulnerable place. Did God really say you're loved? Did God really say you're enough? Did God really say you're forgiven? Whatever it is. And so I think that's a reality our hearts will face until we go home to heaven. And that's okay. For a long time, I felt guilt and shame about that, because I was like, I know what's true. Like, how can I still be struggling with this? How can I need to hear it again every day? And I felt like God showed me, you know what? If you were a warrior standing on a battlefield and someone kept shooting arrows at you, you would not be like, I feel guilt and shame that I am a warrior on a battlefield. That is not proof of our inadequacy. That is just proof that we are not home yet. And so I think that's a big thing for us to realize, to not take that on or think, if I just had enough faith, or if I just did this or that, then I will never struggle with this again. And I can say I've made a lot of progress. I've gotten a lot better at putting up my shield and blocking those arrows, or, I'm not in the same place I was. But at the same time, I think for all of us, being warriors is just part of what we're called to. And so we can fight for our own hearts. And I think we can fight for the hearts of our sisters and our mamas and our daughters and our friends too, because sometimes we get weary on that battlefield and we need someone else to hold up the shield and say, you know what? This isn't true. I text one of my friends sometimes and just say, I can't remember what's true today. She's like, all right, here it is. I'll tell you again. And so I think just knowing we're all in this battle together and we need to have each other's backs and just keep taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you are just so right there. We do need each other. And I think it makes me think of, I don't know who his quote this was, but when we stand in who God truly made us to be and just unapologetically chase after our calling in that way, we give other people permission to do the same, kind of inadvertently, and I think it encourages that in our fellow mamas and our fellow sisters. And I just so agree with that. And so in your own life journey with this performance mentality, perfectionism that, we all from time to time battle, what truths from God's word do you believe have really helped you the most along the way?
I love the verse from 1 John that says, perfect love casts out fear. And I think we can imagine that in terms of external things that scare us, circumstances or whatever it is. And that's definitely part of it, especially right now. But a lot of it for me, it's been internal fear, like the things we've been talking about, that I'm not enough, that I won't be able to do something God's asked me to, that, just that internal fear. And so knowing that the answer to that, yes, is courage, but even more so, it's love. That the more I know how loved I am by God, the more that fear gets crowded out. And so I pray even, God, give me the supernatural ability to believe that you love me every day, all the time. Because I think that in some ways, sometimes is beyond us. But I think that's something God's willing to help walk us through, is to say, I will keep showing you my perfect love. And the word perfect in scripture doesn't mean what we think it does in our modern Western world. We think of it as flawless, but it's actually a word that describes wholeness and completion. So like an oak tree is the perfection of an acorn, if you use it in the kind of true biblical meaning. And so the idea that throughout our lives, we become more fully and wholly in God's love gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah. That's such a good analogy to think about. I've never heard the oak tree metaphor. That's a really cool way of thinking about that. I had heard the definition of perfect, but that's a great thing to kind of point back to when we think about kind of doing battle with that part of just perfectionism and things. And man, what a truth. I just love that. So we've talked about a lot of kind of your past projects, some of, maybe the projects you've most recently worked on. What else can we look forward to seeing from you later this year?
I am very excited. I have a book called The Powerful Purpose of Introverts, Why the World Needs You to Be You. And it's coming out in September. So it's been totally different than anything I've written. It has a ton of brain science in it and research, and so I got to get my nerdy side on. And so, I'm just really passionate about empowering introverts to be who God created them to be, because I think there's so many qualities that introverts bring that our world needs more than ever before. And so it was really fun to write, and I'm so excited for people to read it this fall.
That's so awesome. Well, we are going to have to put that on the calendar and get you back on to talk more about it maybe when it comes out, because
that would be great.
I saw just the title on Amazon and I thought, ooh, I'm going to have to ask her about this. This sounds like some good stuff. So we will do that for sure. So that's super exciting. Well, one of the last questions that I ask almost every guest, it's one of my favorite things, and everybody's answer is always so different, but that is, what is the best piece of advice that you think you've ever been given?
I had a grandpa named Grandpa Holley. Actually, I'm named after him. He was he was born one of like a ton of kids. There was a holly bush outside the windows around Christmas, so he got named Holley. And then it got passed on to me, and he's the one who owned the bookstore. And he was an amazing guy and touched a lot of lives until he went home to Jesus at 93. And I asked him one time, what is the secret to success? And he said, just love all the people. And I've never forgotten that, so just love all the people. And that's what he did. He was part of the Gideons, that hand out Bibles, and he would take one wherever he went in his little front shirt pocket. And he would always take me on a breakfast date. So on our very last breakfast date, we went to this Denny's close to my parents' house where we hadn't been for a year. And as soon as we walk in, this waitress goes, "Mr. Holley, you came back." And she pulls this little tattered Bible out of her apron pocket and says, "I've been reading this every day and since you gave it to me a year ago."
Oh, that's so awesome.
So that's who he was. And he loved people really well. And so that's an example that I feel like I want to follow, is just say, okay, Jesus, who's in my path today? And how can I love them?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. Well, cool. So tell listeners how they can stay in touch with you, how they can make sure they don't miss out on ordering any of the books you've had so far, but then also just knowing about September's book, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, the best way is just go to holleygerth.com and you can find everything there. I also am part of a podcast called More Than Small Talk. So if your listeners would like to add another one to their list, they can check that out too.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, Holley, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I can't wait to hear more about your new book in September.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.